If you were looking for the real England, where would you go? With the European referendum only days away, I wanted to feel the pulse of the place. But of course, one journalist cannot hope to capture the full sweep or discover some broad political reality the pollsters somehow missed. So I opted for subjectivity, sunshine, scenery, and the South. I'm an American, as you may have already guessed, and I've lived here in the UK for something over 2 years, but only in London, a place that in a funny way feels a lot like New York, where I spent the last 20 years. And that is why I've come here to Winchester, where pilgrims have begun their journeys for some centuries. And from here, we head east towards Europe and towards the referendum. The High Street, with its imposing statue of King Alfred the Great, known for defending England against continental invaders, seemed an inspiring place to head off and start talking to people about the UK and Europe. My route would take me from Winchester east across England towards the Channel and Europe. Sport has always been key to the English character, and one of the South's distinctive contributions to the culture of the nation is the game of cricket. So I headed first to Hambledon, where the game, in its modern form, was invented. I felt guilty about bringing politics to a place like this. Still, Will, captain of the first team, was willing to talk Brexit. What is the captain of the first team in the quintessentially English sport thinking right now?
I personally think we should stay in the EU. My friends, almost 100% would want to stay. But if I'm talking to my parents or my parents' friends or some of the other older guys here, then they probably want to leave.
Here's what I learned at my first cricket match. This community loves their cricket, and they think of it as the quintessentially English activity, and they feel their game and their community is thriving. When it comes to politics and Europe and Brexit, there's a lot of hesitation to speak, but there is a sense of division, but no sense of animosity. If sport is one of the threads that holds the country together, it seemed worthwhile to keep pulling on it. So my second day on the road took me through the town of Midhurst to the world-renowned Cowdray Polo Club. While Hambledon felt very much like rural England, Cowdray is where the rural money is. And when people aren't watching polo, they're in the farm shop and cafe next door, run by Rupert. Nice to meet you. Are there English values, and if so, what are they?
I think an attitude of just getting on with it.
Yes.
Possibly biting one's lip sometimes when some of our Latin cousins might be more prone to expressing themselves.
You're extremely diplomatic.
In a way that perhaps we ought to do a little bit more of.
While Rupert was confident that his customers wouldn't be too flustered by any outcome, when I asked him how some of his suppliers, such as farmers, would feel towards the vote, he was less sure.
I don't know, and I think this is the biggest problem, as I understand it, is that the information just is not out there. Yes. Both sides are coming up with stories and throwing figures around. No one seems to know what they're talking about.
There's an amateur night feeling to the whole thing, isn't there?
There is, and for me, the worst part of all is that there's political manoeuvring going on at the very top level, which seems to be irrelevant to the Brexit vote. It's more about positioning themselves for the next step of what's going to happen, and that's disappointing for me.
And what were Rupert's customers thinking about the referendum?
My son at 37, he would come out. My daughter's 34, she's confused. She's like a lot of people. She is confused. She, by choice, I think, she thinks she would stay in.
That's very
But again, they
interesting.
have a business and they're concerned about uncertainty in the country.
It was here that I first noticed something striking. With a small number of exceptions, there was an even and civil tone to the discussions. Except in the newspapers, nobody said that the debate was tearing up the country. Nobody cast it to me in class or party terms. I wondered if, in America, an equally important debate could possibly be so humane. I was beginning to wonder whether any Britons felt firm ties to the continent. Petworth is an English market town so quaint and attractive it might have been designed to charm American visitors, but there is more to it than hunting prints and charcuterie. So I did what any bald man does when looking for the real story. I went to the barber. After over 30 years tending to the town's hair, Salvatore is a local institution. Despite holding an Italian passport, he says he's indifferent to the debate, but that many of his customers want out. Antiques dealer Paul Hawtrey seemed a good person to talk to about European identity. Despite his French and German ancestry and growing up in France, he says he feels very much English.
What is your English gut telling you?
My English gut is saying leave the European Union. We're a nation that's built on trade. We've always done trade. We like doing business. We went to war with the Dutch in the 1670s, not because of religion, not because of land, because of money, because of trade. And that's what...
Well, it's funny you should say that, right? Because the argument we so often hear is that trade will be endangered if we leave.
Absolute rubbish. I think that's absolute nonsense.
Paul surprised me, because despite wanting to leave the European Union, he had a fondness for and strong connection with the continent. A little further afield, in the industrial estate, Phil the mechanic was taking a look at my Mini. He recognizes the need for international cooperation. He just doesn't like the current form of cooperation with Europe, especially on issues such as migration. On balance, he thinks we should be out.
I think we need to learn to be good Europeans. Germany, France, Sweden, Norway, we cannot have this amount of people who are distressed across the world coming to us. We need to talk to the Germans and we need to talk to the French about what we are going to do, and the rest of the EU, but without the MEPs and all that who are making decisions which really, why? Common sense.
As you can see from this sign in a busy roundabout here in Petworth, the town is twinned with towns in Normandy and in Tuscany. But the people I've spoken to here and in Sussex do not feel closely connected to Europe and certainly don't think of themselves as European. But another point, and a more interesting point, is that when I speak to people here in Sussex, I find that the referendum turns out not to be just an issue about Europe or Europeanness. It's an issue about authority. People don't like being told what to do. And in this context, they put their own UK politicians and European bureaucrats in exactly the same category.
British voters today have a strained relationship with Europe and the EU. What about the younger generation, some of whom will be voting for the first time? At Christ's Hospital, a 450-year-old boarding school, students from all backgrounds, the school picks up most of the tuition bills, wear Tudor-era uniforms. The students, as it turns out, really cared about the Europe debate.
I think I would say I'm British, but Europe has a lot of importance to me. And I don't think that I would be able to live a successful existence in Britain if I didn't pay attention to what's happening in Europe and I didn't appreciate what Europe does for me as well.
Right, but you're an Englishman.
I'm a British. I'm a Briton.
That's interesting. What's the distinction?
I think the distinction is that because I was born here, I'm British, but my ancestry is from Uganda and Ghana, so I don't see myself as English, per se.
Of the three terms that Kwame used, British, English and European, I associate myself culturally with all of them. I think they all sort of refer to me in a different way. I've never lived in Europe, but I've been there, and Europe sort of on the continent. I want to see as much of the world as I can, and the European Union seems like a great place to start.
I would vote to leave immediately because I think the European Union has seen us give up our sovereignty, our democracy, and I think it's about time we put the British people, those at the bottom of society, first.
Older sections, the older demographics of our population, they're the ones who actually turn up at the ballot box, but then the younger people don't make the effort to vote because they see it doesn't affect them, when actually it's our future that's on the line here, not the future of the older people, because their lives
are almost over, like my life. I might not make it out of the parking lot today, actually.
I was struck by Kwame's distinction between Britishness and Englishness. It is odd to me that there is so much resistance to the European Union in the United Kingdom, itself a multinational organization. I left West Sussex and drove through Kent to the tiny village of Edgerton, where one of my ancestors, John Lothrop, led the congregation in the early 17th century. At the same church, John Lumley, a warden, showed me around and shared his own thoughts on the debate.
When you walk into that booth, how are you going to vote?
If you'd asked me that question 6 months ago, I'd said I didn't know. My heart would have been out, but my head would have been very full of wonderings as whether that was a good idea or not.
Yes.
And finally, with this campaign, I found myself, rather slightly to my surprise, more and more out, which is what I voted. And if the answer is out on the 24th of June, part of me will be extremely pleased, another part of me will be full of foreboding certainly for the immediate future.
Wherever I went, whether it was churches or country shows, the head versus heart metaphor was offered up again and again. And while I heard quite a bit more out sentiment on my trip, I wonder if the people whose hearts felt the pull of out were more likely to speak to journalists or barbers or neighbors, more likely to put up signs, more likely to make themselves heard, in short. Will those who quietly prefer the status quo have their moment when the votes are counted? And so, finally, to the port of Folkestone, the end of my trip at the edge of the country, and another church. Well, not quite. This former church is now part of the Wetherspoons pub chain. While Wetherspoons has come out firmly in favor of leaving the EU, did others in this coastal town, home of the Channel Tunnel, feel the same? Over a game of snooker with Darren, the owner of the club, I tried to find out.
That was not what I was hoping to do.
I'm British, but I do like the Euro and the World Cup.
Yes.
Where the St. George's flag can fly, because in my heart I'm English.
Darren wouldn't tell me which way he was voting, but his opinion showed that even those with a strong sense of national identity can have quite equivocal feelings about the referendum.
2 months ago, I was one way, and now I've completely gone the other way.
After 4 days, I've met a tremendous number of thoughtful, articulate, reflective people, and almost all of them feel that they're struggling with an enormous decision using inadequate information. And none of them have been particularly pleased with the quality of the public debate.
Looking out to Europe, I thought of those I'd spoken to at cricket pitches and barber shops, and about the persistent streak of skepticism aimed at those in power.
And it seems, whether for arbitrary reasons or not, that the Remain side in this drama plays the role of authority. That, when the vote comes, will probably work against them. The second point cuts the other way, however. I spoke to a lot of people this week about the state of their England. And almost universally, they describe their England as a happy and mostly prosperous place. That should support the status quo and is good news for the country, whichever way the voting turns out.